Hi there. We are once again going to explore some ceramic techniques. In this case, we're looking at the first phase in 3 or 4 phases of making an African spherical pot. And so we're going to make one of these wonderful round pots. You'll see plenty of examples of them in your material. If you look under the watch this section, or even in some of the reading section, you'll see lots of examples of these amazing pots that are coming out of Africa. And we'll explore the history and the culture behind them as we go through that material. But for now, I'm going to show you lots of things about making them. And I'm going to go over the basics of coil building, which is the technique they'll use. This is our bat that we're going to build it on. We're going to start by, the first phase is to build a dome off of this. That's the easiest direction to work with coil. The most stable is to build inward, and that's very, very stable. And then we'll build a foot on top. And then we'll have to let it rest until it stiffens up enough that we can turn it over without it collapsing. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to learn about coil building. For this part, what you'll need is you'll need a round piece of wood, or maybe 3 or 4 layers of cardboard, the same circle shape, same circumference. And this is just shy of 12 inches, which is a little big. You can go 10 inches. I wouldn't go any bigger than this. I would maybe keep it around 10 inches. And we're going to go through this process. You'll need one of these. It would be ideal to also have a turntable. It doesn't have to look like this, but something that you can put your work on and have it spin around. Of course, you'll need clay, and this is Pete's Red, which you can get over at the bookstore. I really recommend Pete's Red for this assignment. And the way that you get clay at the bookstore now, the building is all closed. You call the bookstore. You can even email and set up a time during their store hours, tell them what you need and what you're coming for, and they will let you in to the building. Of course, you have to be masked. You have to wear a mask and practice social distancing, and you can get your clay that way. So that's the clay we'll be using. Also, we have some tools which you either have purchased at the bookstore or you have borrowed one of our loaner kits, which have all these. And what we need for this one is we need a cutoff wire, 2 different kinds of ribs. There's a steel rib here and a rubber rib. And these are both in the loaner kits and the kits that you might purchase, or you may have tools already. And this is called a fettling knife for cutting clay. We may use this. And then we need a paddle. And it turns out this is a great paddle. And I've made these available for the loaner kits. These are perfectly good paddles. The paddle typically has a more ergonomic quality. This is exactly the same thing. It's the same piece of wood with a handle on it, but we don't really have the time or staff to make those handles, but this is perfectly fine as a paddle. And you'll see me using it for this demonstration. So we have that, and I think that's about all we need. We'll need some plastic, of course, some plastic sheeting, and the use of this will become clear. The very best plastic sheeting is what you can get from a dry cleaner, and we'll talk about that. So I'm going to put that down there. And now what I'm going to talk about is how to make coils. Coils are a vital, if you're going to coil build, you need coils. So it's not that complicated. I'm going to make some for you now, and you will see them. I'm going to turn this down, focus on the work surface, so you can actually see it happen. Grab some clay here. There we go. The best way to work with clay when to cutting clay is to use one of these cutoff wires. They are a pretty straightforward kind of idea, just 2 sticks with a wire between them, and it cuts through the clay really easily. And when you're working with clay, try to think about what shape you need the clay to begin working in it. In this case, we need long coil shapes. So I'm going to take and cut a block off, and then what I'm going to do is cut that block into long pieces. So it'll look like this. I'll cut this down this way. I want them kind of thick, and then I'll do it. So I'll cut this into 9 squares here. 9 tall pillars of clay. And then we're going to start making coils out of those. And you may have your own way of making coils. I will show you how I make mine. I'll talk about it a little bit and give you some ideas. So I just take one of these long pieces here. And to start with, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start turning it and squeezing it a little bit, just to get it more round than square. And that saves a little bit of time. And I'll show you a few other techniques that are used by different potters around the world. Different cultures do different things. So you can see I'm just turning it and squeezing it and kind of getting it evenly round. And then I'm going to start rolling it on the surface. Now we're giving you these 2 foot by 2 foot drywall squares. That works really well. Or you may have at home already a canvas covered board. You can also use that. But you want to have something where the clay doesn't stick. And you can see here, I'm rolling and it's coming out really nice and even. You see how even that is. And I want it maybe about 3/4 of an inch thick to start with. It'll get much thinner as I work with it. Here it is. Now, once I've just increased the surface area tremendously, and so there's a lot of, the clay is constantly wanting to dry out. So I put it right in a plastic bag and cover it as I make one coil after another. So let me show you a different way of making coils. Another thing you can do is if you have this kind of rectangular piece here, you can take it, and this is a technique I learned from Korean kimchi potters, making kimchi jars and large coil jars, is you twist the ends, and it's like a saltwater taffy, and that immediately makes it evenly round all the way around, rolling it out. This works. It does, I started rather large and thick here, so it'll take a while to get out. One thing to think about, and this took me years to realize, and it's a fairly obvious realization there, is that a coil comes out smooth, not because my hands are making it so. It's not my hands that are impressing or keeping it nice and even and smooth. The table is the source of all the smooth influence. So I'm putting a very mild, light pressure with my hands, trying not to make impressions. And as I roll it, the table is actually working to make the coil very, very even and consistent. So let me do a variation of that. I can start by squeezing it out a little bit, getting it a little bit thinner and a little bit even all the way around. And then I can use that Korean technique and twist it like taffy. And that twist will automatically give you an exactly beautiful, round, even surface to work with to start out evenly. So that's a kind of combination of those 2 techniques that you've seen, and this works really nicely. And there's another beautiful coil. So you need a few more coils here. Coil building is fascinating in many ways. You'll see examples of it in the videos that I provided for you. And one of the things I love about coil building is you can go to any country. You can go to Japan and find that they have been coil building for millennia, for thousands of years. You go to China, you find the same thing, that they have been coil building. Korea, all throughout Asia, Jamaica, Africa, and throughout the indigenous United States, all cultures, all clay cultures, which is pretty much every continent, has some form of coil building. So I love that about it, that here's this technique. I mean, there wasn't, there weren't really good ceramics magazines, 3,000 years ago, and there weren't really good internet connections. And yet all of us approached this material and came up with very similar techniques. And I think that says something about the shared intelligence of our species across the world. And I think that's a very fine concept. I love coil building for another reason, and that is that it gets, when you get more and more practiced with it, you can see I'm getting quite a few coils here. When you get more and more practice with it, it becomes almost meditative. It becomes kind of automatic for you, and you just get to work with it, and you don't really have to think about it. So for me, when I'm working in a studio on things, I always like to have some coil building project going on. And that's because sometimes it's hard to get started on things. It's hard to get yourself going into something. And if you have a coil building project, you have to come in and first thing you have to do is make coils. And you don't have to think. So you come in and you start working on your coils and you're working on them. And as you're doing it, you're in your studio space, in your workspace. And as you are doing this, your head is thinking about all kinds of things. And by the time you're done getting your coils done, you're ready to go into your art activity, into your art making. All the resistance is gone. You've worked your way through. So I love that about coils. I have just a few more here to make, and then we'll start setting up for our piece. This video may go for a little while. You feel free to move front and back through it as you search for your, you can emphasize the areas that you like. You may not want to spend this much time watching me make coils, so you may want to go into another section. Or you may just come back and say, oh, I missed something. So you can feel free to go forward and back through this video. Now, the next step is to set up our board for our, starting our hemisphere. We're going to build this lovely dome right here with coil building. So I need a little bit of clay for that, not a whole lot, but just enough to cover this board thinly. So I'm going to just take a little bit of clay here. And here it is. Here's a piece of clay here. And I'm going to just turn it into a little ball. You'll see that to start with. So, and this clay that I'm doing now, this is going to be pretty much a waste piece of clay. It's going to have a function to hold the whole piece together. But when we're done, we're going to flip the piece over and cut this out and set it aside. And we might be able to use it to make more coils. Who knows? But let's just turn this into a little ball here real quick. There is a section on how to wedge your clay that you can look at in the ceramics technique section. So I'm just going to make a ball here. And that gets me into the patty cake section of this demonstration. So here we go. 1, 2. Now we're kind of playing a patty cake game here. And you can see that I'm getting it flatter and flatter, but it's round now. And it's compressing down. And I can do this all the way until I get it 12 inches. See, it's bigger and bigger until I get the size I need. Or if you want to try this, you can do a slab stretching technique. And that's where you throw it. And when you throw it, you want to hit it right in the middle. And that will cause it to stretch out like that. If you hit it on either end, it won't work out so well for you. So you want to keep moving it and throwing it. And it stretches out. It's kind of like making pizza, which we do a lot around here when we're allowed to get together. Of course, all of this video demonstration stuff is brought to us by our current situation with COVID. Let's check and see how we're doing here. Boy, that is it. That's just perfect. So I can take my needle tool. This is a needle tool, also called a probe. I sometimes call it a frog sticker. Bad memories from my time in high school biology. And there we have a very thin slab of clay, which goes very easily onto our bat. And that becomes our working surface. And you'll see how this moves. Now we're going to start coil building, and I'm going to show you the 3 steps to coil building. There are three steps. Get my hand in there. 3. No, whatever. 3. And so here's what happens. The first step is wiping the coil with your thumb or fingers inside and out. And it looks like this, right? So here I am. I'm starting out. Let's get this a little closer to you there. And I'm going to push the clay down into that bottom slab of clay that I've created and lift it up. Push it down and lift it up. And each time I do it, I'm going to overlap the previous one. Now my thumb is this wide. And so when I make my push into the clay, I'm only moving about half the thickness of my thumb. And you can see that there. You can see how the marks overlap each other. And that's what you want. You want to go all the way around with one push, one push, one push, one push, all the way around. And we go all the way around our piece. Now we're going to run out of clay here in a second. And when we do, what we need to do next is we need to add another piece of clay. And here's the one important thing. Do not add your clay like this. You do not want to take your clay and push it right up against there like that. You want to overlap it. You want to put it over the top a little bit and then work the clay in like that. So this is the first half of the first step of this process, as you remember, the wiping the thumb on the inside, and the second half of this first step is wiping the clay on the outside. So we'll do that next. So there we go. We've got around once there, and so I'm now going to go around the outside. And you can see here this line, this very clear line between the bottom clay and the top clay. And that's what you want to eliminate. And throughout this process, as you coil, you want to make sure that you're eliminating this line. Anywhere you see it, anywhere on the piece, if you see a gap, a line like that, then you want to wipe through it and eliminate it so that you don't get cracks. Now, I've got a little bit of clay in my fingers here. You can see that, a little bit of clay. And what I'm going to do with that is I'm going to use it kind of like a rib or something. It's going to, as I wipe through the clay, I'm going to wipe that clay down on it and then pick up some more and go all the way around like this. You'll see I'm not using my thumb. I've learned over time that 2 fingers like this is much more, thumb can start to cramp up, and this is very effective and quick to use these 2 fingers like this. And you can see I'm going all the way around the piece here and making sure that I attach it to the bottom there. Now again, that bottom piece is going to be the center of the pot, and we're going to cut that out when we flip it over. But we'll talk about that when we get into the second phase of this process here. So this is still the first phase. This is probably going to be part 1 here. I'm going to put on, actually I'm going to go through the next 2 steps here. So the second step, so you've seen phase 1 or step 1. Step 1 is where I am using my thumb and my fingers inside and out to wipe the clay together. The second step is to do the same with the rib. And this goes much faster. And these are lovely ribs. They have 2 different sizes of curve on them. So depending on what you're trying to create, you can use one size or the other. And you'll see here, I'm going to bring this in as I wipe it. This is doing several things. This will do several things for you. I'm working on the inside first. And there's about 5 different things going on here as I work. And you notice I wiped all the way around in one direction. So now I'm going to wipe it upward. I'm wiping it up into the clay. So always go at least 2 directions, 2 different directions as you're doing this. And what this is doing is it's certainly smoothing the clay. It's also evening the walls because it's so much broader than your thumb or your fingers. So it's evening the walls. It's also shaping. You're being able to shape. You're thinning the clay. Remember, we started with a rather thick coil, and this is adding to the thinning of the clay. And then you are also blending, continuing to blend the clay. There's a lot going on here, the joining. So now I'm going to do the outside, and you can see that. And I will go down this way, and I'll come up this way. See, I'm going this way, and then this way. At least 2 directions. Whenever you're using the rib, make sure you're going at least 2 directions. This is because if you have any inconsistencies with the clay, any kind of bumps or divots or anything, if you move 2 directions, you will smooth over that. If you move only 1 direction, you will increase it. So in order to smooth your clay out, you want to move in two directions as you go. This is true for sanding, it's true for wiping with the rib. It's a very great thing to know about a good technique here. And I don't worry, you'll notice that it's got a little bit of rough edge here and there. I don't worry too much about that because I'll be able to refine it when I get to the end. Now, with one coil on, it's really not too disconcerting right now. You don't have to worry too much about this, but the third step is paddling, shaping with a paddle, and that does both shape and strengthen the clay by compressing it. And I'm going to hold this, see if I can do it over here. You can see it. I'm holding it at a very slight angle because I'm already starting my hemisphere. I want it to angle in a little bit. And I'll go all the way around. And as I get more clay coils on here, this will become more and more important. So there we go. That is now step one. Step one is using your thumb. Here we'll go again, and I'll review it. Step one is using your thumb on the inside and your fingers on the outside. So we'll go around and do that. Step two will be to do the inside and the outside with the rib. And step three will be to paddle. And you just keep doing that as you build coil after coil up to make your piece. That's what's going on here. So, and this technique we may revisit when we do face jugs. That's an option you have. There's a couple different techniques I'll demonstrate for face jugs. And now we've gone all the way around one more time. So that went really quickly, didn't it? And then you can see here, again, see my marks? My thumb is overlapping all the way. And that overlap is really important. If you look at the African pottery examples, if you watch them, you'll see they're overlapping consistently. You look at any Native American pottery, any coil builders always overlap to ensure evenness of wall thickness. And so now I'm going to do the outside around. And I would recommend initially that you work consistently with one coil at a time. That allows you to control the process and really see it emerge, and to really be able to shape it the way you want and you want to keep the piece in control. You don't want it to collapse in, you don't want it to fall outward. So you really want to kind of keep an eye on it as you work. And this, being able to do this one coil at a time would allow you to control that. So we're now approaching the end of our first step of the three-step process of coil building. And you'll see it, you can see that there's still some crevice here, which means I haven't quite completed it. So I do a few more, and then I come up to where I started, and then I can just finish that up. So now I'm back to the rib. So here we go again. I'm going to just do some smoothing. Let's use the curved part of the rib as I go. And I'm smoothing. And I'll get around once quickly. Oops, I get this more and where you can see it. I'm going around very nice, kind of a steady stream. Notice my outside hand is supporting the clay in the shape I want it to be. I'm not letting it flop out or stretch out. I'm holding it in position with my outside hand. And now I'm going all the way around to make sure I move in two directions, as I discussed earlier. And then we'll do the outside, and that'll finish our second step. Okay, and now we'll do the outside. See that here? And as I work on this, I'll go around the other in another direction once I get all the way around. But you can see I'm thinking about the shape. I'm thinking that I do want it to be a hemisphere, so I'm keeping it moving inward as I go. And I'm moving, initially I'm pushing the clay downward because that's going to encourage the coils to join with one another. We want them, when we're done, we want this clay to think it's always been together. It's always been part of one piece of clay. That way it won't crack in the kiln, which is what we want. So then I've gone all the way around that way. Now I'm going to shift and go upward. And again, my rib is overlapping itself as I go around. And this is creating, it's making it possible for the walls to stay very even And you can see that there's some irregularity. There's some parts that are taller than others. Do not worry about that. If you want, if it gets out in your way, if it gets a little too awkward, you are free to trim that off. But it's really not a problem for me now. And the last step again, holding the paddle at a slight angle, I'm going to continue on my way to making a dome. And you'll notice that I hit it quite a lot. I hit it a lot and I hit it frequently. So lots of little gentle taps are better than big, big hits. So that's working. Now, let me just review for you. We'll take these two pieces here and I'll just go over the process again with you real quickly here. So to start with, to join these two pieces, what I'm doing is I'm wiping my thumb down and up and down and up. And wiping is a really important concept. I am not squeezing. If I squeeze, I'm going to make really thin spots in the clay wall and I'm going to make it irregular. But if I'm wiping, what I'm doing is I'm smearing the clay one into the other just to convince it it's always been one piece of clay. Go to the other side, and I'll do this with my thumb, but I would normally do it with my fingers on a piece that was like the one we're making. And I'll just smear that around. So that's the first step, the wiping inside and out with thumb or fingers. And that's what it looks like so far. Now what we do, we take our rib for the second part, and we're moving in two directions, inside and outside. And finally, we shape it and compress it with a paddle for whatever we're trying to accomplish with it. And that's our piece. Now, if we've done it successfully, it will not, see, here's our piece here, it will not pull apart at the seam. The seam will not tear. It can tear this way and here, and because it's one piece of clay now. That's what you're after. That's what you're trying to achieve. So that's the basics of coil building. You'll notice that I don't use any scoring or slipping, which we'll talk about, but we don't have to because it's plastic clay. And as long as your clay isn't too stiff, you should be able to work it. As long as you're vigorously working it in with your thumbs and your rib, you should be able to work it without any scoring or slipping. And that's what we'll do. Now, this is the first part of the phase one. I'm going to stop this. I'm going to build this into the dome. You don't really need to see, it's all repetitive from here. And I'll just take a few minutes to build it until I get right up to the top. And then I'll show you, I'll do another video showing you both how to close that and how to put a foot on it, okay?